Okay, so my name is Chuck Watts, past president of the chartering First Empathy Surplus Congress and our Zoom Master of Ceremonies. Today is the June 2021 Caring Citizen Solution Day speaker series event, and our keynote speaker is Ryan Laree from Light Upon Light. He's a Light Upon Light interventionist. Welcome, Ryan. And before I introduce Ryan properly, I'd like to invite the current First Empathy Surplus Congress President, Anna Bruffy from Virginia Beach, Virginia, to say a few words. President Anna, it's all yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to today's guest series. My name is Anna Bruffy. Not only am I the current president of the Empathy Surplus Congress, I am also the founder and owner of Seaside Fiber Arts, which sustainably and naturally dyes yarn and other products with only organic material. I am also affiliated with the wonderful country of Guyana and started some fair trade down there. And I am just proud to be an empathic person. Chuck or Greg?
So absolutely. Thank you, Anna. All of our 4 empathic activities keep us aligned with our collective thought leadership training mission. And the actions all start with the letter I, inward digestion, investment, implementation, and invitation. We inwardly digest and use the latest brain insights of Dr. Lakoff to frame daily caring conversations to promote human rights. Miriam, tell us about the second empathic activity, or I'm sorry, Marie, tell us about the second empathic activity of investment.
Thanks, Chuck. We invest in weekly congressional hearings about how we apply Dr. Lakoff's insights to advance caring policy directions. Greg, tell us about the third empathic activity of implementation.
You're muted,
Greg. You're muted.
Geez, okay. Now we have it. So thank you, me. We implement caring policy directions through partnerships with ethical businesses, effective government task forces, and other caring society organizations. Chuck, tell us about the third empathic activity of invitation.
So thanks, Greg. We invite others to join us and promote a politics of care. And I'm back to you, Anna.
Thank you, everyone. Greg, would you please tell everyone how they can help build an empathy surplus in their communities with the human rights venture, pocketbook venture?
I sure will. Thank you, President Anna. I'd be happy to. Our parent organization, the Empathy Surplus Project, joined the United Nations Global Compact in 2014. In fact, we joined to implement partnership around policy directions growing out of Dr. Lakoff's 10-word progressive philosophy he laid out in Don't Think of an Elephant. Moreover, we thought the Global Compact 10 principles to help ethical businesses make progress on human rights, living, work, leisure, and anti-corruption of government for the sake of climate survival aligned well with our 4 empathic activities. Furthermore, we launched the Human Rights Pocketbook Venture in 2018 to use the Illustrated Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a framing tool to facilitate collaboration around the community service of youth human rights education. And every year in our centers of influence, we want to distribute a pocketbook copy to every teacher and student in kindergarten, 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th grades, as well as first-year college students. Our donors and volunteers are currently responsible for donating about 2,000 pocketbooks per year. You can find out more at www.empathysurplus.com. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Greg. Chuck, would you please introduce our speaker for us today?
So you bet. Freedom must be expanded, and caring citizens want all Americans to be strong and free from want of fear. Stronger Americans empower and protect each other from harm, so all of our hopes and dreams can be fulfilled and we can all be treated equally. And we do this with an effective public government of, by, and for people. And that makes a caring civil society and private life possible. And when public government is corrupted by conservatism and their unethical businessmen or women without empathy for or responsibility to Americans, our prosperity shrinks along with our opportunities. And since conservatism governs without empathy or responsibility to Americans, if you have no income, you have no wealth, no opportunity, conservatism says that you just weren't tough enough. Because if you were tough enough, you'd be able to care for yourself without anyone's help. And of course, American caring citizens know that's just a big lie. It's a big lie because freedom isn't possible without help from someone else, which takes empathy. And freedom must be expanded. And enter caring citizen Ryan Lurie. I came across Ryan's story on LinkedIn from my friend Edwin Roosh at the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. And Ryan works for Light Upon Light as an interventionist. And he and other caring citizens seek, find, and treat weakened Americans infected by the pandemic of empathy inhibiting extreme conservatism. And it's not an easy vocation. In fact, it involves producing what Light Upon Light calls counter-narrative content designed to activate long inhibited empathy for others. And since the Empathy Surplus Project focuses on caring thought leadership training to reframe our conservative centers of influence, you can see why we wanted to hear from Ryan. Because in the end, if we can't reframe the big lie of we're all on our own and reframe it to what Darwin called the survival of the most empathic and cooperative, we're not going to survive as a species. Freedom must be expanded. And Ryan once suffered from extreme conservatism himself while a member of the Rolling Woods Skins, a Michigan-based offshoot of the largest Nazi movement in the United States, one of them. In fact, Ryan's empathy deficit was so pronounced that he served as a vice president at his most infected moment in the Michigan Nazi organization. Moreover, his job was to expand empathy deficits in others through social media disinformation, and his illegal and immoral activity during that time to finance the extreme conservative empathy deficit operation caused his arrest and his incarceration. And after Ryan's incarceration, he went through a process of transformation and healing to restore his empathy for and responsibility to others. Freedom must be expanded, and we know it can be done when we focus on a politics of care, and Ryan has helped rescue dozens of potential caring citizens that were infected with extreme conservatism and get out of hate groups in Michigan. And he's grateful for the assistance of several organizations around the country and the state, and that help set these infected individuals on a progressive path to a healthy empathy surplus. And Ryan continues to focus on a politics of care, where he has helped to pass caring policy and proclamations in Flint and surrounding areas. So help me welcome Ryan Lurie.
Thank you.
So glad you're here.
Definitely. So I guess I'll begin.
Do it.
My name is Ryan Lurie. I am a husband and father to 6 beautiful children. We have 3 dogs. I'm sorry. Now we just picked up a 3rd dog. 2 cats and a snake. If you have this many kids, you have that many pets. So I was born and raised in the city of Flint, Michigan, which is about an hour north of Detroit. GM controlled town. It was, GM workers, retirees. life and businesses really revolve around what is going on with General Motors at all times. And even today, even though the service industry has really took a good boost because of colleges that we've placed, GM still has, it has its ups and downs, and General Motors does too. So born in a very industrial town. I live now just 8 miles outside of Flint, Michigan in Swartz Creek, which is a rural area, a lot of farms and agriculture. Population size is a lot smaller than Flint itself. And but we do a lot of work with Flint, even our city here, and Genesee County as a whole. So I still love to be here. I've left many different times for different reasons, and I seem to always end up back in the same area where I was born and raised. So I've done a lot of work to fight for Flint, Michigan, to try to bring peace and prosperity to everybody. And in the beginning, I didn't do that. So I'll get into my story of where my life had kind of began and where it's ended up now, and why the work that I do, I believe, is so important, and why so many other people in government and non-government believe that this is important in what we do. And like I said, I was born in Flint, Michigan. I have two sisters and a brother. My mom was a single mother working third shift job, taking care of us all as much as she could, having two rambunctious boys who never wanted to listen. It was hard to try to keep us under control at all times, especially working this third shift job. She would hire babysitters, and she tried her best all the time. She always had food on the table, and that was what was important. And she always showed us love, no matter what, throughout my whole life. I always try to make sure that people understand that my mother's side of the family was very loving people still to this day. They would invite anybody to their household, to their cabin, wherever it may be, to come out and just enjoy love. And that's what my family on that side gave me. I lived kind of what I called two lives. My father's side was a very Irish Catholic family. It was not uncommon to hear racial slurs at the card table at night while cigarettes were being smoked around everybody. And there was a lot of abuse. My father is an alcoholic. What he's doing today, I'm not sure of. I have never really been able to have that relationship with him. Have I forgave him for things? Yes, because that's for my own healing. But my father himself, very abusive to myself and to women that he was with in his life. I was sexually abused at a very young age. About the age of 3 and 4 years old, I was sexually abused by an uncle in our family. And for the longest time, blamed myself for those things. I had this hatred built up that I thought maybe I had did something wrong as a child. And, I held on to that resentment and that hate for a long time internally. Growing up as a teenager, didn't realize how bad those things were still affecting me, even after seeing counselors and things that my mother had taken me to. I started to rebel. I was an all-A student up until about my sophomore year of high school, when I decided that I was going to be hanging out with a different crowd of people. I started to use drugs, alcohol, and really just didn't care what anybody had to say. I was on a mission to destroy myself. I eventually was put on probation for stealing a car. I had crashed the car after stealing it into a parked car. And the judge thought that I was a perfect person or candidate for a program in Glen Mills Schools, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. It's a boys' school. And I was there for about 2.5 years to where I graduated from. After graduating from Glen Mills, I went straight into the military. So I went from one very structural school of all boys into another program that was very structured, government ran, and fought for this country. I served in Iraq in the U.S. Army, and went through a lot of mental abuse there in its own that I learned after counseling and years of seeing psychiatrists and psychologists of just how bad I'd never really allowed myself to heal. I'd kept going from one thing to another and to another. And so I came home from the Army, and I would say very mentally sick, and I was struggling and stressed, and jobs were very hard. We're talking about a time that was right around the housing crash. The city of Flint was struggling Much like they were in the 80s with the recession, because General Motors had started to actually buy out people, tell them, look, we can't have you here anymore, but we'll buy out your contract. Guys were leaving to Florida to open up landscaping businesses, and those that couldn't take buyouts, took layoffs. And because of this, much of the businesses around here started to struggle. So it was very, very hard to find work, even as a veteran. It didn't matter unless you wanted to work out of state and leave or could afford to leave the state, you were home. I had an incident happen, which is very important to understand how emotions can drive human beings into doing things, and why it's so important for empathy, and we'll get into that. But my emotions at the time were very angry, and I was angry at the world. I was angry at our government. I was angry at my father for never being that kid that, was taken out to go fishing or hunting or have that type of, relationship with him. And I was angry at myself, and I didn't know why. And because of this, I had why my case is so different from a lot of other people's who chose to be part of a hate group, is I had friends that, and still to this day, those are my friends that are in the Black community, and they were best of friends. Matter of fact, at the time when I did join this group, I only had maybe one white friend. And not that that matters, but it does, because my case is much different from a lot of other people's who maybe had been part of a hate group because their father brought them into it, or they had been part of this their whole lives, and then it was kind of a generational thing. With me, it was not a generational thing with this hate group. But I had a friend of mine that was very, very close to me at the time. Like I said, I was struggling. We had a couple pizzas in our house, Totino's Pizzas, me and my ex-wife at the time. And we were hungry, but I wanted to make sure that she was fed. She was pregnant, she had to eat. And we had cooked these pizzas, and a friend of mine asked, hey, can I have a little bit of that? Well, if anybody knows how big a Totino's pizza is, it's only a little square. And it wasn't going to do much for me at all, let alone making sure that Joanna was fed fully. So I usually would let her eat most of it. And I had a friend steal one of those pizzas from us that night. Now, was this something that should have drove me off into a hate group completely? No. And just in case you guys do hear some noise backgrounds, understand I have children that are home right now for summer vacation. So sometimes they don't completely understand what it's called. So this pizza gets stolen from me. It's a great friend of mine. I'm like, wow, how could you do that, knowing that, Joanna was pregnant? And because of this, it made me angry, made me upset. And enters the predator in my life, my uncle, who had just got out of prison. This is the same uncle that had molested me as a child. And I didn't know this at the time, that a lot of victims have a hard time disconnecting themselves from their predators throughout life. And it wasn't until my counseling and transformation that I learned this. My uncle was in prison. Before he had entered prison, he was never part of a hate group. After getting into prison and coming out, he had joined the Aryan Brotherhood while he was in prison. And he was right there. He was there right around the time that I had this fight with all my friends. He knew that I was angry at the government, and he thought, man, what a perfect time for me to introduce him to my friends that I had met. Now, he explains to me that he wants to introduce me to a group of guys that he had met while he was in prison. Some are out now, and they've got a great program going. Let me take you over there. He doesn't say right away that, this is a hate group or anything like that. In my mind, I'm going, I know who my uncle's been hanging out with. Most likely that's what we're going to end up seeing. So I've already got this envisioned, this thought process going on in my head, that fear of flight or, fight type response is building up. And when I get there, there's a guy, he was armed, he was blocking the gate. And if anybody knows anything about Flint, Michigan, it's a very small city. Houses are very, very close, just like most cities do. And to see this guy right next to another residential house, just with a pistol out like it's no big deal, guarding a fence to a garage, more or less, it was a little weird for me, but it didn't instantly, because I'm with my uncle, I trusted enough to go into this place. And I was expecting to see these huge, tattooed, shaved head, just raging out to some type of rock music and crazy punk music or something. And that's not at all what it was. I walked into this room to a guy that probably weighed maybe 110 pounds, the most. Very small in demeanor, spoke very, very polite and educated. He knew how to talk to people to get them to listen. He was much like I talk to people today. He was a cult leader of his own. And he knew how to play onto people's anger and hate and emotions. And he didn't start conversations off with hate, ideologies or any of those types of things. It's a lot of people think that these guys come to you and that's what they want to talk to you about right away. It's not how they recruit. They recruit you by finding out what it is that is bothering you the most or what it is that you need. So at the time I was struggling to find a job. He said different ways that he could help me to make money. He told me that, there was a right for me to be angry at the government. There was a right for me to be angry at my father, but that they could help me out with that by giving me a brotherhood that I had never saw before. All these different things while you're going through these different emotions, and he's offering these ways of helping you out with them. So at first I wasn't really ever open to the ideology. I was more of just opened up to, hey, here's a brotherhood, much like the Army gave me, that are promising to pull me away from my financial burdens right now. And so I started to hang out with these guys. And because of my military experience, Ron had, who since has been murdered through all of this, and we can get further into that part of the story too, the leader of the group at the time. He brought me in knowing my military service. He knew that I could speak well. My father, as much as he was abusive, was very involved in politics. He was a union organizer for years. Very, very close to the Bill Clinton campaign. He actually helped get Bill Clinton elected, very close to Bill. He's got pictures smoking cigars and all kinds of good stuff with Bill Clinton back in the day. And so he did teach me a lot educationally when it came to, politics and how to get people to listen. He did a lot of different public speaking himself. And so Ron knew this. Ron liked it because my uncle explained everything to him. And so Ron knew how power worked, and he knew by offering some position of leadership. And I'll be honest, my ego at the time was like, yeah, like, wow, like, look at this. Like, I've never had a group this big listen to me and sit down and want to hear what I had to say. And that was when he actually had made me vice president of the group. Now, this had been a few months after being with the group before he decided to go ahead and do that. But my ego played right into it. I that drive for power that human beings seem to always struggle with. And I started to help basically militarize and structure a group that had been very unorganized before, a very violent group, unorganized violent group before. A lot of people had already been locked up and put into prison. And we had started to basically mainstream, or wanted to mainstream, what hate groups were doing at the time onto social media platforms. Now, we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have a lot of the different social media sites that we have today. MySpace was the primary go-to for a lot of people if you weren't on regular, just different websites and forums that were already out there for hate groups. So we used MySpace to our advantage at the time because they weren't, blocking groups like that. They weren't censoring, speech. You could pretty much say everything you wanted to say on there. And that's kind of what we started to do. We linked up with the National Socialist Movement, which is today still one of the largest Nazi socialist movements in the United States. We linked up with 2 organizations out of Canada, some in Europe, and started to basically try to network with these groups on what could we do to build something bigger than what each one of us were individually, as a group. And to do a lot of this kind of work, you have to have financing, just like any organization, whether you work for a 501c3, the government, whatever it may be. There has to have resources. And in those types of groups, it's very hard to go out and get a job. Some guys have worked construction, things like that, and we dues that would be due that they would pay at the end of the month. But the other way was by doing illegal activities. And some of us, it was very easy money. It was very easy to go into doing these kind of things when the money was paying the bills. And so that's what we started to do. And I was actually caught. And it's going to sound crazy, but we were stealing brand new boat motors at the time. There was a big scheme going on, a scam to steal these boat motors. We would sell them for about half the cost that they would be brand new. And then the other gentleman that we were selling them to was selling them to police, volunteer, firefighter groups. They had no idea that these boat motors were stolen until a major investigation was brought in. Because we were already being watched through the group that we were by local police. They figured out that it was us, and I eventually was brought in. I was questioned, And when the police first brought me in, I was very angry. I didn't want to talk to the police. Leave me alone. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm never going to help you out. You might as well just, go ahead and leave the room today. I'll go to my grave with any of the names, it doesn't matter. I was PFI'd pending further investigation, where I went back to the group again for a short time. So understand, my transformation hadn't started yet, but it had, I just didn't know it yet. It takes separating yourself from those types of groups a lot of times for things to be very successful when it comes to intervention work. After my PFI, I was worried, man, I'm going to get picked up. I know eventually, I don't know when it's going to be. What should I do? Should I run? Should I flee? So many different emotions were going on. And I eventually was picked up. I was brought to Genesee County Jail, where I was met by not only the local police departments, but I was met by the FBI, several different organizations that deal with hate groups. They had pictures of not only myself and the guys that were part of this group, but they had pictures of my mother, and other people in my family that would never have anything to do with this, but they knew what they were doing when they used these pictures. And it really, it caught my attention enough for them to start doing the work that they needed to do with me when it came to de-radicalizing. And I didn't know at that time that's what they were doing, but they were very good at what they do. And I'm happy that they have, because that's been a major part of my life and where it's taken me in the direction that I am today. Like I said, I fought back against the government at first. And then eventually over time started to have conversations with some of them and some of the work that they had done with people, informers. I had helped the federal government in bringing down a couple of organizations that had planned major hate attacks in the United States. But I still had to serve time for what I did. This didn't give me an out. I didn't take a deal to say, hey, if you help us do this, we'll give you this. I did the time for what I did. I knew what I did was wrong. And during that time of incarceration, I actually met an inmate that he read all kinds of different books by Dr. Cornel West and different civil rights leaders for years. And he really turned me on to Dr. Cornel West at the time. And some of the things that he had said about not giving up on formers. He had actually had an interview too with CNN later on that I had watched that was very, very interesting about not giving up on formers and the work that these formers can do, especially after they've left these groups, to help out when it comes to civil rights. And that if we turn them back to those same groups again, or return them back to being these solo, on their own, or feel like they don't have a support system there or any type of empathetic system, then they're most likely to either become lone wolf terrorists, which we've seen a lot in this country, or fall back into wanting to start some type of group like that again, or, just a complete failure, just trouble. And I definitely didn't want to go that road. I started to really educate myself. A lot of what happens in this country, around the world, period, is fear breeds ignorance, or ignorance brings fear, and that fear really feeds into the hate. And we see that a lot with hate groups and gangs, inner city gangs. I mean, it doesn't matter. An extremist group's an extremist group, and it's usually because of a lack of education that this person has even ended up in the situation that they're in. I went through years of transformation. Like I said, I saw psychologist after psychologist, psychiatrist to figure out why, and why did I ever feel this way? Why did I join this hate group in the first place? Did I actually believe in the ideologies that I was talking about, or didn't I? Was it just a thing about being here to be part of something? There were so many different things that we worked through in my transformation. And one of the biggest things, and this is a lot of what you guys work with, is empathy. Empathy was a major part of my transformation, because those same Black families that I told you had been friends of mine for years, even after joining these groups, still never gave up on me. Miss Veronica, who I consider like my second mother to this day, called me right after she'd heard about my incarceration after me being released, and wanted me to come over to their house for dinner. And I sat down with my best friend, Emmanuel. Me and him both have the same tattoo together. And we cried for probably an hour or so of just two grown men crying about how much we missed our children being able to have a life together, and how much we did as kids, and how they just never believed that anything that I was doing was for hateful purposes, and that they knew that I was just trying to survive like many of us do in this world. And because of that empathy, because of them not and with them, there was more sympathy involved too, and love there, you know. I really realized that, wow, man, look what I've done. Look at the people that, you know, I've hurt in this process. Look at the people that didn't give up on me. And it's lucky that I had that structured love and empathy and support system that I had, because not everybody has that. And it's very, very important that we as citizens and organizations like this and others do provide that structure or provide that sympathy and love and empathy for people that don't have it when they're trying to pull themselves out of a process. So I leave the hate group. I start working locally with civil rights leaders, doing different things here. I started a program called Team Revelation Mixed Martial Arts. Wanted to find ways that would bring inner city kids out of gangs or into anything that I had ever became part of. And, you know, what was it that we were missing in the city of Flint? And mentorship was one of the major things that I saw that a lot of kids just didn't have. You know, most people were either missing their father or their mother in their lives, whether they were in prison or had died, you know, to some type of gangland shooting. And so we wanted to provide the kids with something that we knew would attract them, you know, and allow them to come in and be part of something bigger than just being part of a gang on the streets. Boxing programs had always been major in the city of Flint. We've had some pretty big boxers. Matter of fact, Clarissa Shields right now is the champion pro boxer in women's boxing. And mixed martial arts is really becoming really big around that time. And so we thought, well, maybe this is good. I had friends that worked as social workers in different fields that had did some forms of mixed martial arts. I had did some while I was in the military. I had other groups that were working at some boys' schools here locally. And we sat down, we came up with a program, and within 3 weeks of the program starting, where we thought maybe we would have 3 or 4 kids coming in, we had over hundreds of kids coming into this program. I think at the highest point, we were right around 320 some children. We started working with Genesee County Juvenile Department and Shiawassee County Juvenile Department to help kids from going into long-term facilities. They could come to ours program, help them out to give them some type of structure. Understand we didn't just do mixed martial arts. We provided them with tutoring for education. We had shake and smoothie machines that were set up if the kids wanted to come in and make their own shakes and smoothies, and vending machines. Basically like the Boys and Girls Clubs have been doing for years, of trying to just provide these kids with somewhere, a space that was safe and free from, you know, the violence out in the streets or at their homes. Eventually, like a lot of organizations, if you don't have the funding, if the grants aren't there, things can fall apart. We were lucky to have been given the space that we did by a church called The Bridge there, that we had just over 6,000 square feet of space, which is amazing to have for free. And we would try to throw the church money all the time, and Pastor Steve at the time would give it right back to us and say, no, you use it for the organization. And we didn't charge anybody, you know, it was free. And but eventually the church had some issues with some permits for building some walls and some different things, and because of that they couldn't afford the space anymore, and so we ran out of space. It starts me on a journey of kind of why do organizations like this fail? Like, why are these mentorship programs that we need so much, why are they failing? And so I started to indulge myself in politics more locally. Why are politicians maybe in some of the areas outside of the city of Flint receiving more money when parts of Flint needed more money, needed this money for these types of programs more than there? You know, why is this happening? And so I ran for public office eventually after working for 2 organizations, Michigan United and People's Action, which is a national organization. And I was talked to by members of the Black community and the Latino or Latinx community that said, hey, we want you to run for this position because we'll never be able to run a Black guy for that position or a Black woman for that position. We'll never be able to run anybody in the Latino community for that position because it's always a racist man that holds on to that position. So we need somebody like you who's had a past that understands how all these people work to run for that position, not necessarily to win, because I told them right off the bat, I don't want that kind of power. Like, I understand what those kinds of things can do to people. Please do not push me to do this. But after sitting down with a lot of different organizations and kind of understanding why and what we were doing was, I decided to do it. It was important. We ran a campaign that really drew this man, forced him to go left from where he had ever been before. And because of that, he lost a lot of his support. And I lost my election. I did lose my election by about 1,000 votes. But the next election came around and Ted Henry lost his election to a woman who was a Democrat and had spoke out against hate crimes and was all about equality. And she's done an amazing job since she's been in that position. And so a man that had been in his position for 20 years as a county commissioner in this area voted to say that racism wasn't an issue, was finally out of office, and they were able to kind of get some work done there. Just so you understand why I ever ran for office, especially in my past. So I walk away from that form of politics. I was introduced to a couple gentlemen and eventually got a call from Jesse Morton, who started Parallel Networks and Light Upon Light, the organization that I work for today. Jesse is a former jihadist recruiter, an extremist who has got a couple different documentaries that have been made about him and books that have been written. And Jesse has worked for years now in the realm of empathy and intervention and understanding. And but like his circumstances, he was there where I was at one point in time. Jesse was probably one of the largest, what we want to say, anglicized or Americanized what jihadism was at the time. Started to create a magazine and kind of mainstream what that was with leaders that were working with these, Al-Qaeda and different organizations, or terrorist organizations in the Middle East. And I don't know if you guys can remember the story about the South Park creators of the cartoon. They had made fun of the Nation of Islam. They had said some comments about people, Muslims, and they had said made some cartoons about Allah. And this really upset him and other groups. And so they had this whole thing that they were going to basically come in and kill the leaders of South Park. And the FBI had been monitoring, and the NYPD had been monitoring Jesse for a very long time. And Jesse knew that most likely the police were going to be coming down onto him pretty soon. So he took off from Morocco. And when he was picked up in Morocco, he was expected to have a bag thrown over him and them take him to Guantanamo, and he'd never be seen again by family members. But he was surprised that they never put a bag over his head at all. They flew him back to America. They sat him down in a seat and they started to talk to him about his life. Why did you ever get to the situation where you are today? And they treated him like a human being. And he said because of that, it really opened his eyes up to this government that he had been looking at as being this imperialistic, just, caused this mass devastation across the whole world, and started to see that, well, maybe there are some real humans there. And it was that opening empathy that really allowed him to start making his transformation and change too, into where he eventually helped the FBI to stop over 200 terror attacks in the United States and abroad. He's helped to build plans for the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, multiple different intelligence groups, and other organizations that just work on healing and rising above, hate ideologies in the United States and around the world. And I got a call from him one day. I got a call from Jesse. He had read my story several times. If you Google my name, you'll find my website and a lot of different things that I have done across the country and world. And that's what Jesse looks for. Jesse and his group of people, and I call them my family now, they try to find what they call shapeshifters, people that are trying to make a major change in their community that maybe have been in one shape or way or form of another, on an extreme side that had made a drastic change, and that they're over here trying to help out for the better good of all people. And Jesse reached out to me, and since then we've had a brotherhood that is inseparable. He's taught me so much. Daryl Davis, he introduced me to, who was a huge person during my transformation that I got to watch documentaries and stuff on. And I'll tell you more about all those guys here too later. But definitely two people that you'd want to look into that are doing major work in this field is Jesse Morton, who you can look him up, Google him, you'll find everything on him, and Daryl Davis, both amazing guys, amazing people. Hope Hyder, she's another woman that I work with that her father was actually killed by somebody in a hate group, and she actually documented her forgiving the person that killed her father in prison. She went and actually has meetings with him still today to let him know that, she forgave him because it helped her in that healing process. And so that's very important work too as well. And so anyway, so what I do now as an interventionist is through Light Upon Light, we have a 24/7 hotline, so that if you're at home and for some reason you have a loved one that you feel maybe joined in a hate group, or maybe you've been part of a hate group your whole life and you feel like, man, I just don't know if this is right anymore, they can call this 24/7 hotline and we will answer the call, speak to the people, kind of go by case situation, because every situation is a little bit differently. But we also work with intelligence organizations. So if the FBI or other groups that are investigating, hate groups or jihadist groups, and they say, well, man, this guy really we don't think that he's necessarily a threat to society, but he really is opened up to probably being able to be de-radicalized and somebody that could really be turned to the better side of things. Maybe you guys can intervene, do some work there. And so that's kind of what we do. We talk to people by email sometimes. This is as far as it goes, and they don't go any further with you. We talk to them in phone, and sometimes we just try to find them in person and talk to them in person. That's where the big work of empathy comes in, because if you don't have that empathy, if you're not willing to believe that every single human being can make a change for the better, then your interventions would never work. They just won't work at all. We'll never be able to have a society that's able to have a healthy dialogue and healthy conversation if we can't believe that each one of us can make a change for the better. We're all human beings. There's no perfect stamp out for what a human being should be. None of us are perfection or have perfected anything, because I can't remember who it said, the old saying that if you call yourself a wise man, then you're not very wise at all. You always have something to learn. And I think empathy has probably been one of the biggest things that I had to come to an understanding of, and why it was so important for me to look at every single person, no matter what their mistakes were, as another human being, and to give them that chance to explain themselves and to talk without interruption and without my own view coming into play, me just to listen to them and understand why they have this perception of reality, because we all have a different perception of reality. And if we can give that person a different perception, the right perception, we can help to change the ways that they view the world. And then maybe they've just never really received the education that was necessary so that they could see what the world really is full of. For the longest time, and I'm not saying this about any religion as one, I grew up as a Christian in most of my households. And there was times where I felt like maybe I was a little bit more narrow-minded, that I wasn't opening myself up to other religions and what they were doing and trying to find the good in those things. And Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet, I've read a lot by him. I believe that he was an omnimist. I think he was born a Christian, but he was an omnimist, and that he believed in finding those good in every religion. There's always somebody that's trying to perverse something, and then there's always those that are doing the good of what it was meant to be. And I think that's what he intended for. And so I kind of tried to follow in a lot of what he did and how he looked at the world. And through mentors like Jesse and other people, it's really helped me with my intervention work. Like I said, our interventions usually start off with an email, a phone call. Hey, you guys want to meet at a coffee shop in public somewhere? And when I sit down to have a conversation with them, I don't start off a conversation with, well, why do you feel this way? Why do you hate people? Why are you part of a hate group? That'll end the conversation right off the bat. Most likely that person will get right up and they'll walk right out of the room on me. I start off by getting them to understand that I'm a human being just like they are. And then we point out all the things that we have in common with each other and our similarities. And most of the time, those similarities outweigh the differences that we have, in the hundreds. And you realize that we're all just normal people, just trying to make it by, just trying to survive. We just want to be respected. We want to be loved. We want to be fed. We want to have a house over our heads. Each one of us wants these different things. And it can happen. It can happen in a world that we all can come to some level of understanding with each other, but that starts with empathy. I say this to people all the time. Empathy does not mean that I have to have sympathy for this person. So empathy just means that I'm willing to sit down at the table with you and treat you as a human being. That does not mean that I have to sympathize with your cause. It doesn't mean that I have to believe in what you're believing in. It just means that I'm listening. And I'm listening. When I say listening, I mean listening. Today it's hard for people to, we're on like a 30-second, where where you have about 30 seconds to catch somebody's attention before they're on to something different. Most of your Facebook ads, social media ads, they use about 30 seconds of your time because they know if that ad doesn't end in about 30 seconds, you're going to cancel that video right out. So a lot of what we do with that is also counter narrative work that you spoke about, Chuck. And the counter narrative work that we do is really to, we'll use clickbait. So sometimes you'll see an article that says, "Black people are not my friends." That was actually the title they used for my video. And somebody in a hate group is going to see that and go, "Oh, that's something I might be interested in listening to." And so they click on that. And when they do, it's actually a story of me and how I pulled myself away from a hate group and how I was able to change myself through empathy and love and understanding. And at the end of the video, it's titled "Escape Hate." And people are actually able to call the hotline and the phone number in those. And that actually has pulled dozens, if not hundreds of people away from not just hate groups in the United States, but also jihadist groups. People that are in jihadist groups that saw my story and video have called and emailed organizations to say, "Hey, I saw these videos. I saw the work that you've been able to do. What can you do to help us out?" And so that's where I am today. That's the work that I do on a daily basis, traveling the country and the world. Hopefully with COVID restrictions starting to come around and be lifted again, I'll be back to traveling the world again. As of right now, I've been doing a lot of my work from home in Michigan, but I love the work that I do. You know, if it wasn't for my story in the past, I don't believe that I would necessarily be able to help people out as much as I do today. And it's because I've saw the other side. I saw how ugly it can be. I saw how destructive it can be to not just myself, but so many others, and how destructive it has been in this country and around the world. And so here I am speaking to you in an organization that's doing a lot of work on empathy. And I just love anytime that my platform and story can be told, my narrative can be told to the world. I'm there for it. And I'm happy that you guys are doing the same type of work around empathy. I think it's very, very important that becomes a part of, and I don't just use this for my, group sessions for interventions on people in previous hate groups. We have what we basically consider empathy circles within our household too, with our kids. We have, like I said, 6 kids, and they don't all understand each other completely all the time. They have their fighting and their combativeness, and we have to sit them down and, and tell them, give them a chance to speak, allow them a chance to speak so that you guys can understand why your brother or sister feels this way. Now, we can't necessarily bring the dogs and the cats in on those conversations, but they do enter from time to time. So, but here I am. I appreciate you guys having me here. I hope that I didn't babble on for too long on my life story. You can find out a lot more about myself if you go to my website, which is Ryan for the number 4change.com. That's www.ryan4change.com. You can also find out about Light Upon Light at lightuponlight.online. I don't know why we've never got a .com, but .online works, so they use it. And you'll find out a lot more about what we do with the Control-Alt-Delete-Hate method that we use. And it kind of goes through, there's some links on there about shapeshifters, so you can see a lot more than just myself, or other people that are using empathy within their work to do what they do on a daily basis. Many have wrote books and have different research projects out there that are amazing to look into. So I just appreciate you having me here, and shoot away with questions if you've got them.
We've got about 9 minutes, 8 minutes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, Ryan, I turned my video off because as you were talking, I found link after link after link about you. So, and I was basically inspired by how you transformed yourself. So the question that I have is, when you first moved away from the hate group, were you in imminent danger? Like, was your life in danger? Because sometimes those groups don't want people leaving. So and if you were, how did you get away?
Yeah, so I was threatened, and I'm still threatened today by not that organization, but several other large organizations that know the work that I do and don't want me around. It was the relationships that I had made with local law enforcement and with the FBI and others over time that really helped me to feel a little bit more safe. I was never put in a witness protection program, but having that supportive family around, you always had enough people around for you to feel safe. and knowing that your local, you know, police and organizations, they knew that you maybe had some information that could help them out. And, you know, it kind of helped me to really feel a little bit safer. But, you know, in the beginning, I was threatened by the group. I was told that if I said anything, you know, I would definitely be found and shot and killed, or however they were going to do to me. I did take it very seriously, because before I had ever become part of this group, like I said, some guys were imprisoned for killing what they considered an infiltrator in their group. They had stabbed and actually drowned the man in Flint, who was a Jewish man that had tried to infiltrate the group to get some information. So I did fear for some time. It took me a very long time to feel safe enough to go out into the general public. And I also hid from my story for the longest time. I didn't realize how important my story actually was to tell. And so today, if I think it's a credible threat, and with most of them, I'll still send over to the FBI and local law enforcement. Some you can usually tell if it's just somebody, you know, just trying to make something, but you just never know, you know. So most stuff I do forward over to the people that I know in law enforcement and say, hey, if you can, and if you think this is credible, just kind of take a look into it. It's sad that my house, because of the work that I do today, I have to have cameras on almost every angle and corner. We've had people from hate groups that have came out, and I'm put nails underneath of our tires. We've had to fix tires, you know, numerous amounts of times, and windows busted out. And living in a rural area, I do live in an area that's, we've got a couple of different, what they would try to call themselves militias, but are actually forms of hate groups to themselves. And so I've had some altercations with them, even though I try to sit down and still have that level of understanding. Some people will just never want to heal. Some people never want to change, you know. And so yes, I did. Long story, I was in the beginning, I was threatened, and still today, every once in a while, I still have something that comes through, whether it's email or a phone call, that you just never know, you know.
Thanks. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Who else has some questions? Anybody?
The name of your friend Jesse, what's the last name?
Yep, it's
Morton.
Morton, and that's Morton.
Oh, T-O-N.
Okay.
And he's actually got a couple documentaries that are, I don't know if you guys stream like Netflix or any of those different streams.
I've seen his documentary.
Yep, you can go to Amazon. Daryl Davis, his are on there too. And Daryl actually wrote a book too called Clandestine. And gosh, to know exactly how that's titled or spelled for sure. But you just Google Daryl Davis's name and he'll pop up all over the place too. He's been doing work for many, many years in the civil rights. He's got one of the things I just enjoyed recently. I said we went to Virginia Beach. On our way, we stopped in DC, and I took my kids to the Lincoln Memorial, and I made them come to the spot where Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. And one of the things that Daryl Davis always talks about with that speech is, you know, we all go to see the Lincoln Memorial and see these huge statues and all this different stuff that we have that this country has built, you know, from past presidents. But nobody ever pays attention to the small star on the ground. And that's the spot where Martin Luther King had stood during his "I Have a Dream" speech. And Daryl likes to call that walking on a dream. And that's because we just never take the time to look down and see, you know, where we're standing and how important a spot, you know, meant to so many people. And so I love Daryl. He teaches me so much, and just it's in that documentary, one of his, that he talks about that. So if you get a chance, definitely look into his life and the work that he's done. He's got his own TED Talk and some other stuff out there that you'll enjoy.
I saw a documentary on Daryl as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Wow, that sounds good. I guess, you know, thank you so much for sharing your story. And you know, lately I am an empathic person, and I've been really feeling, you know, the visceral anger that a lot of these people feel. And you know, you talk about your transformation, and our friend Mary Beth, who isn't here, she's very good at
She tried to get on. She had difficulty, and
well,
I didn't. Yeah.
she's very good at interrupting that those neural pathways that are focused on that fear. And I just wonder what happened with you. Was it the time with the FBI and the police department that showed you pictures of family, and you know, did that interrupt your brain pathways somehow?
I think it all had something to do with my eventual transformation and walk away from the group. But I think, like I said, I think the biggest thing for me and was the biggest change was when I realized that no matter what mistakes I had made in life, my second family, Miss Veronica and the family, the Lloyds never gave up on me. They showed me that they still had that love and care and compassion and unconditional love. You know, most of the time you receive unconditional love from your mother or you know, a close relative. You don't get it from somebody that is basically, you know, just a friend or a friend's mother. And she'd always showed me what it was to be a God-fearing man. And she never gave up on me. Even knowing that I had joined this group, she knew that that just wasn't me. And she still shows me that love today. She just asked me recently to actually write a letter for her son in a whole different situation. And, you know, we talk constantly. She tells me stories. She lives out in Nevada now. And she's loving the weather, so she's always telling me or teasing me about Michigan's weather at times, and so I think it was that unconditional love and empathy, and just that the understanding that we're all humans. Being treated like a human being was a huge part for me in being able to change, because I was very anti-government, and so yeah, to have an FBI agent or have a police officer that didn't call me names, didn't beat my head up against the wall or say something to me and make me feel like I was some type of animal. They showed me some type of love in some ways. And that started, but that was just the beginning portions of what it took for me in my transformation. You know, it's been almost 20 years. And for some, it takes longer. For some people, it takes a lot longer to ever pull themselves away from that. I wasn't somebody, like I said, that had, yes, I did have some racist people on my dad's side of the family, but it wasn't like my grandfather was in the KKK and then his, you know, my, you know, great grandfather and so on, and my father. It wasn't like that. It was more of just that love and empathy, really, that opened up my heart to making the changes that were needed. And then education. Education is so important.
Yeah, you're very lucky to have had that. Yeah, and the education, and I guess that's what we're working on it also with our human rights pocketbook project.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Well, thank you, Ryan, so much. We're at the end of our time here. I'm going to turn off our video, but it doesn't mean that you have to go. But it is the end of our hour. And hang on a second, I'm going to turn this off. But thank everybody for coming.